Hello, 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 everyone. It's Cassandra Ward for Transgender Diverse Veterans of America Action Group and the non-action group side too. So this happens to be Thursday morning already, December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, Day of Remembrance of the attack on Pearl Harbor and all the lives lost there. So we acknowledge that. Also, we want to just point out that, we do have a meeting tonight with our executive leaders and other leadership people within our organization. And we're going to be talking about actions we can take to kind of, get the right out there to pay attention to us. So far, they're just ignoring us and everything we do. Every time we turn around, they're ignoring everything that we have to say. So let's see what we can do about that, huh? So anyway, today, the first thing I want to point out again is that all the opinions expressed here are mine and mine alone. They do not necessarily reflect those of any particular organization, agency, department, group of people, person, or anyone. They're strictly my opinions. Okay. So with that in mind, today I was thinking about doing something a little bit different in terms of, let me kind of bring that back up a little bit. I received an email this morning from a friend, and they were asking questions about, why I say that the Heritage Foundation and this Project 2025 that they put out here, that is, that's basically theocratic, authoritarian fascism. It's very close. And they were asking why I said that. And, kind of looking at it from that perspective. So I wanted to dig into it and kind of take a look at it just to see, just to show you why I think of that, why I think that what they're doing is theocratic fascism, theocratic authoritarian fascism on top of that. Part of it has to do with the fact that what they're trying to do within Project 2025 and with the document that represents that, the mandate for leadership, and the policy document, what they're doing is blurring the lines that separate church and state. Not just that, but actually not just blurring them really. I guess blurring is kind of a mild term for it. They're actually just destroying the line that separates those two. Like Speaker Johnson says in the House, he thinks that that's a mischaracterization of the way that the founders framed our Constitution and our government and all that kind of thing, that they never intended for there to be a separation of church and state, when in fact they did. Because they were all of different beliefs, okay? Many different beliefs, actually. So they knew that they had to separate those two, just some way to kind of keep that from occurring. You didn't want a theocracy running the nation for good reason, because generally those things, those kind of organizations, those kind of governments tend to go after those they don't like. And we can see it around the world today. There's all kinds of examples of that. If you don't agree with a certain religion, nationally sponsored religion or the national religion, then, guess what? They kind of try to remove you from the whole public square. You can't talk, do anything or anything like that. You have no way of, talking to people because, you don't exist to them. And that's what would happen with a theocratic, authoritarian, fascist nation here. So why do I attach the label of fascist to things? Well, first, let me just take a look at something that Lawrence Brett wrote in 2003. There are 14 characteristics of fascism, okay? So let's go take a look at it. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Then we'll go look into Project 2025, the document itself, and, see if we can search terms for certain things and just to see what the plan is within the Heritage Foundation and Dr. Roberts, who's the president of Heritage, by the way, what their plans are. If a conservative wins, and there's the caveat to all this. Let me say this before we jump into all of that. They have taken, I'll give a little backup and preface to all of this. The Heritage Foundation has been around since 1973, which means they're 50 years old. Okay. And the very first mandate for leadership they produced was written in 1980, and it was handed off to President Reagan on January the 20th of 1981. And he had already bought into it. He knew what he was getting into. So he was able to implement for the Heritage Foundation about 2/3 of their mandate. But it didn't have as much detail or specificity and all kinds of this stuff with each particular office or agency, anything like that. But 2/3, that's pretty good rule, but they didn't think that was enough. But they continued that same model every 4 years or so, for every new presidential election that came along. They kept doing that, and they kept putting them out. They even gave one to Bill Clinton, President Clinton, and he helped on some things for them too, because he's more of a centrist Democrat or a conservative Democrat, kind of in that vein. So anyway, that's where they kept giving these mandates for leadership off to the presidents. And when President Trump took office, they also had back in 2017, on January the 20th of 2017, when he took office then, they had a mandate for leadership for him. And he was able to accomplish some things for them then as well, but not nearly as much as they wanted. Okay. They wanted a whole lot more, but they learned from that though. And not only did they learn from it, but they brought in a new president, Dr. Kevin Roberts, shortly after that, after the elections, after Trump left office, and brought in Dr. Kevin Roberts from Texas, who runs a state level organization that's a lot like the Heritage Foundation. And so they brought Dr. Roberts in to be the president of Heritage, and Roberts has a much more radical and kind of a combative way of addressing all this stuff. It's more militant than any of the rest. Okay, so than anyone else who's ever had the reins of power in the Heritage Foundation. So Dr. Roberts then decided that, look, all these mandates for leadership that we produced over these past 48 years or 47 years or ever how long it was, is that they're not getting the job done, and they're not helping our president whenever they go on day one to actually accomplish all the goals that we would like for them to accomplish. So he decided instead, and he brought together, at that time, it was just a handful of other organizations that were like-minded organizations and individuals back in April of 2022, to create this Project 2025, the mandate for leadership for when and if a conservative wins the election in November of 2024. And on January the 20th of 2025 at noon Eastern, when that person says, "So help me God," they want that person to have a complete list of people who could step into any of those offices and positions within the whole of the executive branch, and then accomplish the goals that they want within every office and agency, department, whatever. And so they want to make sure that they're trained, they're vetted, they're completely on board with this package deal thing. And I'll show you in a minute what I mean by all of that, their policy and their statements about it. And so we'll go into it just a little bit, and you'll be able to see just how much Dr. Roberts has taken Heritage Foundation and now the 80 plus organizations that are aligned with them on this project, and the 400 plus individuals who have contributed to it. They've taken this, Dr. Roberts took this, gave it structure. It's very well organized, folks. It's a beautifully organized document. I mean, it's got everything in it, steps, processes, who's going to do this, and what has to happen to make this occur, and where you need to have political appointees in every office, kind of reminiscent of the Soviet Union. Remember the Soviet Union, y'all? I'm not sure where, your knowledge, background on all that, but the Soviet Union would assign a political officer to every military unit. There was one on subs. There was a political officer on a submarine. There's political officers on ships. Their purpose was to ensure that the people there were communicating exactly what the Communist Party wanted, and that no one was going to take over the ship and defect with it. They wanted to preserve their own way. And those political officers were appointed. They necessarily weren't military. They were just political officers, observers, but they had more authority and power than the captain of the ship. Because if they saw the captain doing something that they didn't agree with, all they had to do was say, hey, look, I'm going to call up the line here and get this taken care of and get out of the way. And see, that's what this Project 2025 wants to do within all of the executive branch offices, agencies, departments in the whole of the federal government, the entire executive branch. But before that can be accomplished, though, on day one, this new conservative president, whomever that might be, has to be able to go in and do what President Trump tried to do at the end of his administration. And that means applying and issue an executive order called Schedule F. Schedule F allows the executive president to fire at will. It's an at-will employment. Changes the status of federal employees to at will, meaning they can be fired and replaced at will, period. And then within that document, the policy document, there's references to these political officers being established in all offices, everywhere, anywhere they might have an issue where they think that the current people in those offices are the deep state kind of stuff. but anyway, that's what they're going to do first, is try to get Schedule F and an EO, an executive order, reestablishing Schedule F, so that federal employees are at-will employees. And that way we can, put back in the spoil system for appointees in all these offices and get rid of the bureaucrats who actually know not just how the system works, but are also competent in those fields, or have knowledge in those fields, who if they're in the, let's say, EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, actually may have degrees in that and actually know what they're talking about. But yet you're going to replace those people in those offices with political appointees, the people who have been favorably approved by the Heritage Foundation. And that's what this is all about, folks. That's what this is about. But their stated goal is to reduce the size of the federal government, but they don't intend to do that right off the top. I mean, they're not going to go in there from day one and go, okay, half of the people in the executive branch of the U.S. government, all employees, half of them are gone. Like Vivek Ramaswamy wanted to do is take, just every odd number with a Social Security number, every person whose Social Security number ends in an odd number. He actually said something like this, odd or even. And whatever their Social Security number is, if it's odd, get rid of them. It had nothing to do with the office they filled or the qualifications they had for that job. It was just that, I want to cut half of the federal employees down, just gone, half. And that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, because people who have been trained in certain things actually know things about it, probably more than a political appointee would do. However, the whole point of Schedule F is to be able to go in there and have complete control of the executive branch. Now, why is that significant? It's significant because back in Reagan's day, someone wrote a paper kind of expounding on this new concept, this new theory of executive leadership. And it was the unitary executive theory. Okay, unitary executive theory. It began under Reagan, but they never were able to implement it. Their thinking in this theory is that the chief executive, the president in this case, has complete and total control over the executive branch of the U.S. government and can do with it as he wants. He or she or they or whatever, whomever that person is, they can do whatever they want. And that's what the unitary executive theory is all about. And you need to just look it up if you'd like to. It's there. It's available somewhere. Go check it out. Unitary executive theory. There's books written on it. So they believe that the executive president has that authority to put people wherever he wants within the executive branch of the federal government, without regard to whether that person is actually capable of knowing anything about that, because that's really not important. Those appointees have one goal in mind within the executive branch. There's only one thing that they have been focused entirely on. Yes, they say they want to reduce the size of the administrative state. Yes, they want to cut the executive branch of the U.S. government in half or more. Ramaswamy wants to do 75%. But Others, they just want to cut it all down. They just think it's too much power there. And granted, there may be cases like that. However, you have experts who know what they're talking about, and you ought to let them actually have a say in this. I mean, really, let the science kind of help a little bit here. Whatever, if you have a knowledgeable person in that field, leave them there. Or, find another person who may have ideological similarities to what you want, but make sure they're an expert in that field too. However, that's not what the goal is. They don't care about that. Their goal is to do what Dr. Roberts wants to do in the forward. Let me just go to the forward really quickly in this thing, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Pull over to the forward, and then we'll jump back to the fascism stuff here in just a second. Okay, so now I'm on the project2025.org website. This is a Heritage Foundation product, and there's 80 plus organizations, I think. Let me see if it's still that. It doesn't say it right there. Training, personnel, no. Okay, policy. Let's just click on the policy. But anyway, the last time I checked on this page over here, they were there were 80 plus organizations. All right, so now they kind of give you a hint of what they want to do with this statement right here on the policy tab on the top of the page. And they say, and this is it. Let me just increase the size just a little bit more just to make this more readable for everyone. This book is an invitation for you, the reader, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and Miss Smith, to come to Washington or support those who can. Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. But they're not going to do the deconstruction right away. It's going to take them a little while to do that kind of thing if the conservative wins in November and becomes president in January of 2025. They're not going to just deconstruct the administrative state until they have accomplished certain things. Now, within this statement, this one statement here, they give you a really good flavor of what they mean. Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and Miss Smith. That's their definition of a family. That's exactly what it is. And their definition does not include single moms, single dads, same-sex couples, anything like that. Doesn't include that at all. So let's go over here to the mandate itself. Now, don't buy the darn book. It's $35, but it's sold out right now anyway. But just download the manuscript right here. You can download the whole thing if you want. And we can do that. I can pull it up for you, but I wanted to do one other thing before I do the whole manuscript thing. So let's go into the forward. Each one of these, you go scroll down this page on Project 2025, scroll down through here and click on the forward. Just start right there. Dr. Roberts, President of Heritage. Just start right there and go looking in here and see what they want to do. Now, yes, it's about deconstructing the administrative state, ostensibly. But they don't want to do that too fast, okay? They're afraid that, there'll be remnants of whatever they don't like left if they just go in there and just slash everything down, but they won't get rid of any of the things they don't like, okay? Let me tell you what some of those things are that they don't like. In paragraph number 2, they actually talk about, the toxic normalization of transgenderism, as if I'm an ideology. Are you an ideology just as a person? Are you a personal ideology? No, you are you. And the ideologies that you believe in are different. Those ideologies can range from anything like conservatism, liberalism, socialism, or whatever, or even religions. All those are ideologies. Everything, because you choose those things, or at least you have a choice in the matter. Okay, somewhat. Somewhat. So, and then this just, that's in the second paragraph, folks. That's the second paragraph. Go on down to page 4, and then you find out what they're really about doing. Okay, first thing is, though, this is on page 3. These are their goals, okay? This broad fronts. They call these the broad fronts, the 4 broad fronts that will decide America's future. All right, restore the family. Remember, that was up on the top of the page. Restore the family with their definition of a family, not not the definition of family that you and I see and understand and appreciate, but restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. Right there. They tell you everything that you need to know, and they actually explain this later, and I'll show you in a minute what they mean by that. Restore the family as a centerpiece of American life. Okay. That does not include single moms, single dads. That does not include same-sex couples, same-gender couples. Doesn't include that. And then protect our children refers to the thing I mentioned a minute ago about the toxic normalization of transgenderism, because that's where they mention, pornography in schools and kids and all that kind of the tired trope that has been going around for 70 or 80 years, where they associate, anything they don't want with pornography and children and schools and women, because, you got to protect all of those, right, from this nefarious thing out here, even though there is no connection at all in relation to that. So, yeah, they tell you a lot about themselves right there in number 1, that broad front. Number 2, dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. Defend our nation's sovereignty, board, and bounty. Secure our God-given individual rights to live freely, what our Constitution calls blessings of liberty. Now, obviously, they only mean for that to apply to certain people, right? Only certain Americans are entitled to the blessings of liberty, according to this. Why? That's the only reason they put that broad front number 4 in here. Secure our God-given individual rights to live freely. Those of us who don't look like, act like, believe like, think like them aren't included in this. Okay, so that is page 3. Let's go down to number 1, promise number 1, restoring the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. Okay, this is on page 4. Bottom of page 4, they tell you what they want to do, starting on day 1. They're not reducing this administrative state right off. The very first thing they want to do, and by the way, when they get on these talking shows and stuff like that, all these talking head shows, or they go out and pontificate on what they're trying to do, like Dr. Roberts has done for the past 2 weeks, basically. I think I've seen him on a lot of different shows. He's not talking about these things. He's talking about the thing that is important to many conservatives is reducing the size of that administrative state and restoring power to the American people. Those are the things that they're putting out there. But that's not number 1. That's number 2. Number 1 is this. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation, gender identity, and remember SOGI here. SOGI is the acronym used for sexual orientation, gender identity, diversity, equity, inclusion. Obviously, there's an acronym for that, DE&I. Go down here, and they want to delete these words: gender equity, gender equality, gender awareness, sensitivity, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights. And then they don't stop there, folks. They put a comma at the end of that, and they go, and let me just pull this up here. And any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. A couple of things in that for you to know. First thing is right here about deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights. They don't mean me and you. They don't include us in that because, do we have rights or not? Are we protected or not? No, according to them. But what do they want to do with that? They want to take it out of all of these other things, regulations, contracts, grants, anything. But the thing I wanted you to remember about the SOGI point that I mentioned a minute ago about sexual orientation, gender identity, grant. Why is that important? So let's take a look at that for really, really quickly. Let's just take a look at it. So you hear all these conversations out there about They're wanting to. They think that they say that there's not enough data to support anything to do with transgender people getting the care that they need, and all this kind of stuff. They're saying there needs to be more science, more data behind it, but they're not serious about that. You know how you can tell they're not serious about it? Because they don't want to have the terms even acknowledged across the whole of the federal government. They're going to, if you remove the words sexual orientation, gender identity, diversity, equity, inclusion, equality, reproductive health, and all those kind of things, if you remove those words from the whole of the federal government and you can't use them, then offices at the National Institute of Health that conduct research on the social determinants of health, and we know that there are many social determinants of health, right? Each minority population, every minority population, receives different levels and quality of care by the fact that they're in that community. If you don't believe that, well, the data shows otherwise. But they're saying we need more data, we need more data, we need more data. But then they also say we can't do the research on that because we can't study those words. And so they're going to close the offices within the National Institute of Health that do the research on the sexual orientation, gender identity, the SOGI research. There's an office for that at National Institute of Health, because they know that this group of people, the people within the SOGI community, have different and more negative impacts and more negative outcomes on their health and their wellness and their thriving because of the social determinants of health. But if you can't study it, you can't see it, it becomes, you just close your eyes to it and you pull the blinds down and you go, wow, there's no problem anymore. We don't talk about it. You didn't do away with the problem. You just defined them out of existence. You actually remove the words that could be used to study them, to actually study this population of people in any kind of real and scientific way. Okay. Because you want to let them use those words. So you're going to remove it. So the grants go away. So the research goes away. The offices close, and the social determinants of health still remain. And the quality of life and the thriving of the people in those communities still is there. But, you can't do the research that you're saying you need to do the research on. I mean, it's just craziness, folks. Craziness. That's really all it is. Craziness. But yet, that's what they want to do. All right. So now let's go take a look at something. I gave you the preface for all this, and this is why this is such a big deal to me, because they just want to be blind to any difference in the country. As a matter of fact, Christopher Rufo says this, and actually said to me, paraphrasing a statement that was made yesterday by him on his Twitter feed, saying something that we just want to return to the place where you can't see color. In other words, let me rephrase that. He wants to return the country to the place where you can't see any differences between all the different people. And if you get rid of all the words that define them, like, diversity, equity, inclusion, all those kind of words, or sexual orientation, gender identity, any of the LGBT people, stuff like that. I mean, if they just want to see Americans as one thing and not acknowledge that there are differences in each one. And even the people who do acknowledge that there are differences, and I had that conversation too with someone that actually pointed it out. And this person jumped in and said, on Twitter, Chris, they called him Chris. Chris knows that there are disparities in health outcomes. Really? So you want to get rid of the words that define them, so you can't research them, but you're going to claim that you need more data, but you can't do the research because you want to remove the words. Okay, that's my take on that one. Holy crap, these people are crazy, right? Now, let's go back over to my main screen. There's no comments. Somebody's still watching. I don't know who you are, but anyway, thank you. So now let's go back and look at the question that was initially raised by someone who sent an email to me this morning. I'm not going to mention names. They're executive director for a national veteran organization. So they had asked the question about why I was calling in a letter that I sent out yesterday, why I was calling the Heritage Foundation and those organizations that support them and the people who are there, why I'm saying that they are trying to impose a form of theocratic authoritarian fascism on the United States. Well, for one thing, If the forward that I just read to you from Project 2025, written by Dr. Roberts, doesn't kind of convince you of some of those things, there's a lot more in that forward. You can go read it yourself, folks. Go check it out. You can see it right there. You can see exactly what they want to accomplish. But anyway, so let's kind of go back and look at what does it mean whenever somebody says that someone or an organization or a government is fascist. Well, in 2003, this person by the name of Lawrence Britt did a study on a number of different fascist and proto-fascist type organizations or governments around the world in history. They picked 4 or 5, I don't know which one, Pinochet, Hitler, Mussolini, there's a couple others in there, and looked at the common characteristics between all of them. What defined them? How did they get to that place? Here they are. Let me present this page to you. Hold on one second. And I'm going to go here. Here we go, folks. Let's take a look at this. 14 Characteristics of Fascism by Lawrence Britt, spring of 2003, in the Free Inquiry magazine. Political scientist Dr. Lawrence Britt recently wrote an article about fascism, studying the fascist regimes of Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Suharto, and Pinochet. Dr. Britt found they all had 14 elements in common, folks. He called these identifying characteristics of fascism. And obviously, the excerpt is in accordance with the magazine's policy. Okay, the 14 characteristics, let's take a look at them. Powerful and continuing nationalism. And just that one thing, there's nothing wrong with being proud of the nation that you're from. Nothing wrong with that. But here's the qualification of what that means. Fascist regimes tend to make constant use of patriotic mottos, slogans, symbols, songs, and other paraphernalia. Flags are seen everywhere, as are flag symbols on clothing and in public displays. Now, look, I've got flags. I keep a flag. On the beginning of this show, I flew the flag. You saw a flag flying in the background. The difference is that I'm not out here saying, if you don't fly this, if we don't have this shown, if you're not showing that, you're not American. No, as a matter of fact, you can be an American without all of those things. But if you are demanding that someone else carry this flag and it be presented in every way and you're protecting it, then that's one of those steps towards fascism, okay? Disdain for the recognition of human rights. And it says, let me just read this to you. Because of fear of enemies and the need for security, the people in fascist regimes are persuaded that human rights can be ignored in certain cases because of need. The people tend to look the other way or even approve of torture, summary executions, assassinations, long incarcerations of prisoners, etc. Disdain for the recognition of human rights. Folks, most Americans would never, ever see this, or they would never feel it. They would never understand it. They would never grasp that as being something that is a concern, because the majority have no experience with it. None. And all this talk about reverse discrimination and stuff like that, that's just hogwash. The thing is here, I'm in this community. I'm a transgender person, a veteran. Okay, I get it. I'm in the LGBT community. And I can tell you that the stuff that was written in that foreword by Dr. Roberts and that we hear all the time. As a matter of fact, in the debate last night, December 6th, 2023, right here where I live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the debate between the 4 remaining challengers to Trump, DeSantis, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley. What was the common thread? It was getting rid of transgender people. Jeez. The majority of people out here just say, no, there's no issues with human rights. This is a great country. And I said, yeah, it is. It really is. But it's got a long way to go, too, though, because it still is attacking the human rights of parts of their population. Just read the forward to Project 2025. Okay, identification of enemies and scapegoats as a unifying cause. I just told you what they're talking about at these debates now. Trump's talking about it now more than ever. Everybody else is talking about it over on the right. But you know, the people they aren't talking to about that are veterans who happen to be transgender, active duty military people who happen to be transgender. They aren't talking to any of us because we don't represent a narrative that they can easily manipulate. All right, so let's go down through supremacy of the military. Yeah, you know, we all have that kind of thing. It's a common refrain, actually. The U.S. has got the best military in the world. Yeah, but you know, there's a lot to be learned, but we also put a lot of money into it, more than any other country on the planet. But supremacy of the military, that's a big thing. Rampant sexism. Just read the forward. Project 2025, controlled mass media. Absolutely. I mean, what are they trying to go after now? They're going after all their enemies and that's what Trump wants to do. That's what Steve Bannon, Kash Patel, all these people over there, the talking heads that you see over on the right, who are potentially who potentially could be appointees within the office of the executive of the president of the United States, if he wins the election, because they're already talking about these people for different roles. I just read an article about that this morning. I'll show you. Well, if we get to it, I'll show you. Rampant sexism. We got that one. Controlled mass media. Obsession with national security. Yeah. Okay. Religion and government intertwined. Da-da-da-da. Yep. Governments in fascist nations tend to use the most common religion in the nation as a tool to manipulate public opinion. Remember the image of Trump standing with that Bible he had in his hand that was upside down in front of the church in D.C.? Bible he was holding was upside down. But anyway. Okay. Enough said. Got the picture. Corporate power is protected. Yes. Absolutely. The industrial and business aristocracy of a fascist nation often are the ones who put the government leaders into power, creating a mutually beneficial government or business-government relationship and power elite. Now, look, let me just stop right here and just say that these things can be applied left and right. And depending on who's looking at them, one side will say, okay, the left's doing that. The other side will say the right's doing that. I get that. I know it. But right now, the threat is from this conservative bunch over on the right. They are the ones who are doing everything along the lines of this. Labor power is suppressed. Of course, they want to get rid of all the unions, and all of those things, the educators' unions and everything. Any of them, unions are a threat. Disdain for intellectual and the arts. Don't need to say any more about that. When you've got a candidate, a former president, a candidate who won't read anything unless it's Mein Kampf, by the way. And I'm saying that because I know from stories I've heard that that's what he kept beside his bed, a copy of Mein Kampf. Okay, but anyway, I mean, you give him a paragraph on a burger, he might read the paragraph. Maybe. The obsession with crime and punishment. Rampant cronyism and corruption. Remember the forward? Remember the website I just mentioned to you a minute ago about Project 2025 and all the things that they want to do? Clean out that administrative state, put in their own people under Schedule F, using Schedule F to replace anyone they want to replace. So in the entire executive branch, and then just, that's it. Cronyism and corruption. That's it. And they think that yes, there's probably corruption that's taking place in the federal government right now. No doubt. Somebody's greasing somebody's palm somewhere or something. We know that's in there. But if you apply Schedule F and you go in and do this and you use, political appointees to put in there, it's going to become worse on magnitudes of scale. Fraudulent elections. Sometimes elections in fascist nations are a complete sham. Other times elections are manipulated by smear campaigns against or even assassination of opposition candidates, use of legislation to control voting, numbers on or political district boundaries, and manipulation of media. Fascist nations also typically use their judiciary to manipulate or control the elections. So what are we hearing? People on the right, a large number of people on the right, think the election was stolen. And so that gives them the authority, if they win, to go in there and change things the way they want it. Every one of these points can be applied to what's going on with the Heritage Foundation and what they're doing right now. Every bit of it, all of it. And so just take a look at this. This is actually, you can go look this thing up, the 14 characteristics of fascism. Go check it out. You'll find it. You can read it. And yeah, like I said before, it can apply to both sides. But right now, the threat to our nation is coming from the right. And all of these things apply to them. All of them. Now, the other caveat, the other point that was brought up by the person who sent me that email asking about that theocratic, authoritarian, fascist part. Theocratic part, let's go back over to Project 2025 again. Let's go take a look at that. I'm going to show you something. Let's go present. Back to Project 2025. Share screen. Go up to the window. Hit that and share. Now, this is the forward part. But let me go in here and type in this into this one. This is actually the whole document, the entire thing. Let me go in and just kind of drag this up to the top. Go to the top of the page. Now, what I'm looking for are terms that conflate religion and social things, social issues. All right. So over on the side, I'm going to hit the little magnifying glass and search for the word social. Now, how many times does it occur? Oh, it's still climbing. Still climbing 169 times. So I'm going to scroll through these pretty quickly because I'm looking for one in particular. Oh, wait. Okay, that's from that. That's up top. I'm going to go through all of these. Got all of this there. The forward. Full of it, probably. I don't know. Socialism of the 70s. Okay, yeah, whatever. Social implosion. Social media. All right, let's go on down. Socialist. All right, I'm looking for social sciences. Maybe I can type that in. Social science. Social science. Social science. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Social science. That's the one I remember reading. All right. This is, let me see where we're at here. Anyway, go back down here. This is, they tell you what they want to do right here. Protect faith-based grant recipients from religious liberty violations and maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family. Social science reports that assess the objective outcomes for children raised in homes aside from a heterosexual intact marriage are clear. Note, all other family forms involve higher levels of instability. The average length of same-sex marriage is half that of a heterosexual marriage. Financial stress or poverty and poor behavioral and psychological social outcomes. Not true. But anyway, so here, this is a clear example of why I call this theocratic authoritarian fascism. And the thing is, the social science that they want right here, remember, if you're going to do grant recipients, look right here, grant recipients, if you have deleted all the terms about sexual orientation, gender identity, LGBT people entirely, and you remove the offices that do that research looking for social determinants of health, then how are social scientists going to be able to tell you anything other than what you want to hear? With that, I've got a lot for you to think about right there. Let's stop sharing. Go back over to my main page. I'm keeping that one up, so I'll look at it again. And so, with that, I just want to say thank you for watching. This has been a wonderful day. The topic is horrendous, but nonetheless, it's something we have to talk about incessantly and completely and all the time, every day, all the time. Okay? Have a good day.